Hi, good morning everybody and welcome to this morning's Talking Cafe Live. We're going to talk today about enjoying EXMOOR National Park and the Quantock Hills safely and responsibly. And I'm lucky to have in the studio with me today Andy Stevenson, who is one of the rangers with the Quantock Hills AOMB. And I'm Jane Lillis. I'm village agent with the West Somerset team. And if you are joining us live, please post in our comments and let us know that you're there. If you've got any questions for me or for Andy regarding the regulations now, or any information you want on enjoying the Quantocks for Andy, please pop them in the comments. Let us know that you're there. If you've got any questions for the village agents that involve us needing to help you and you need to give us some personal details, please just message us via the Facebook Live messaging system or call us up on 01823 21222. I will double check that number because I'm always getting it confused, but we'll make sure it goes up in the messages, okay, in the comments. As we know, as from the 29th of March, we were let out of lockdown. The pandemic has seriously affected how much we can get out and about, but we're now able to go out and meet up in groups of 6 or 2 families together and enjoy our outside spaces. We know that there was a study done by Natural England back in 2020, last year, that being outside in nature is definitely good for one's state of mind, for one's well-being. 85% of adults reported that being in nature makes them happy, and that's consistent across all age groups. And the main reason people visit natural spaces were given as fresh air, physical and mental health, and connecting with wildlife and nature. And I'm sure Andy's able to give us a little bit more info on how those things can be enjoyed safely and responsibly on the Quantock Hills. So I think before I witter on too much, I'm going to hand over to Andy to tell us what the situation is on the Quantocks at the moment and to give us some hints and tips on safely enjoying the big outdoors. Hi, Andy.
Good morning. Nice to see you. I think it's worth just kind of giving a quick summary of the past 12 months, really, just to kind of give an idea to people what's been going on. Obviously, it's been a bit unusual. So obviously during each lockdown, it's been nice and quiet on the hills, which has given the wildlife a bit of time to establish itself and recover. But as soon as we come out of each lockdown, it has been incredibly busy. And that's great. You know, obviously, as you said at the start, it provides people with an open space, particularly if you live in an urban area, town or a city, to get some fresh air, see the wildlife, and spend time with your partners, your family, etc. But it has put a huge amount of pressure on the countryside, both in terms of car parks, trails, paths, etc. And on the livestock, the lambs, the foals, etc. So it is a finite resource, but people are making the most of it at the moment. So as you said, from the 29th, we're kind of back out of another lockdown. And although Easter was busy, it wasn't quite as busy as we thought it might be. But obviously now things are a bit different today, with the shops and so on open. We're hoping it's going to kind of quieten down even more, with people kind of being able to go into pubs and shops, etc. So the kind of, I guess, the issues that we've seen, particularly over the sort of end of lockdown 1, sort of tail end of last summer, was just huge numbers of people and that has caused quite a few issues for us in terms of just the sheer volume of people. Car parking spaces are obviously limited, but that's caused people to park perhaps where they shouldn't be, on the open common, or in gateways, farmyards, etc., causing the landowners a few issues. And people want, quite rightly, to sort of socially distance and have their own space, but it's meant that people have kind of explored places that they perhaps shouldn't have done, either walking, riding, in some cases camping, and it has led to a massive increase in the amount of litter. And obviously that's something that we've had to deal with. And normally we would rely quite heavily on our huge band of excellent volunteers, the volunteer rangers and various other groups. But without them, it's fallen to myself and the other ranger to deal with. And as well as that, obviously the council-run waste partnership tips were closed for a large proportion of last year, so we've seen a massive increase in incidents of fly tipping, both sort of small-scale household waste to kind of industrial builders' rubble, etc., which has become a problem. And since sort of the various lockdowns, some people have obviously taken the opportunity to buy a new dog, a puppy. It's been great for puppy sales, I think. But obviously now that people are going back to the countryside, they perhaps haven't been out with a dog in the wild areas before, so they haven't quite maybe trained them properly. They don't quite know the kind of ins and outs of what you should do with a dog in the countryside. So particularly at the moment, from the 1st of March to the end of July, is a really strict period when it's a legal responsibility to keep your dog on a very short lead or in very close control, because of the lambs and the foals that are now out on the hills, but also the ground nesting birds. And part of the hills are protected for those ground nesting birds. So that's one issue. Obviously associated with dogs, there's dog poo, which is an ongoing issue. There's either the people who just let their dogs do stuff anywhere and everywhere, or there's the alternative group that seem to think it's okay to pick it up in a poo bag and then either leave it somewhere or hang it up in a tree, assuming the fairies will come and
take it away. Yes.
So again, that's not it's not very nice to see, but also it's pretty disgusting to deal with. So they're kind of a few of the issues that we've been dealing with. Massive increase in the amount of campers and camper vans over the hills. Obviously, people can't go abroad, so people are parking overnight in camps in car parks, which is not allowed on the Quantock's. I don't think it is on Exmoor either. We do direct people to formal camping businesses. That's where you should head. And in some instances, we've had people kind of parking off the roads in amongst the bracken and the gorse, then deciding they might like to have a disposable barbecue or something. And we've had a few incidents of fires where it's got out of hand, or they've left it assuming it will go out on its own. We've had to call the fire service a few times in the last year as well. Not on the scale of what they've recently seen on Dartmoor and Exmoor, Dartmoor and Bodmin, or even up north, but it is an ongoing problem. It only takes one rogue fire and we could lose the heather and the gorse, all across the hills.
And while, of course, we had a reasonably wet winter, things are drying out now, and the fire risk gets higher as we go into the summer, doesn't it? So
absolutely. I know we've had a little bit of drizzle and hail this morning, but that before that it's been dry as a bone. It really could cause a massive fire if it got out of hand.
Yeah. Yeah. And I know I'm certainly down at Greatwood, you've got barbecue areas down there, haven't you, that are available? Is there anywhere else that has those on the Quantock's?
That's it, I'm afraid. Well, those are, formally provided by Forestry England. So there are, tables set aside for barbecues and disposable barbecues. The parish council down at Kilve have now installed some new picnic benches with metal tops at one end where you can use a disposable barbecue, but pretty much everywhere else it's a no because of the risk, both to wildlife of leaving the litter, but also, as I said, the fire risk as well.
Yeah. So let's. I'm going to pop up the new countryside code that has just been launched as of the 1st of April. Let me see if I can get this up for everyone. Where's it gone? It's there. Is that going to come up? Hopefully. There we go. So if we have a look at this, and it, as I say, it is a reviewed and new countryside code that was launched by Natural England on the 1st of April. And you'll see, I've got a feeling that this screen is showing it. I'm not sure if it's showing it back to front. Okay, but we'll start with the left-hand side, as that's what it is. And I mean, its first thing there is respect to everyone, and I think that's critical advice, isn't it, Andy? If you're coming to the countryside, you need to respect those who live in it, work in it, and others who are enjoying it.
Absolutely, yeah. I think that's the key to all of this. Is it is a working environment, but also it is a finite resource, as I said at the start, because there's only so much space that we've got available. So use it wisely, use it carefully. We are seeing that, towns in the area, Taunton, Bridgewater, Willerton, are all expanding. It's only going to have more and more visitors. So use it carefully. Otherwise, it will get, degraded, if you like, or it won't stay as beautiful as we want it to. Yeah.
And that, under respect everyone, we've got leave gates and property as you find them. And critical, I know, going around on social media at the moment is a post with showing an open gate and illustrating it as it could be a crash, a field of sheep with lambs that are going to get out. There's all sorts of reasons why, if you find a gate that's closed, you must close it after you if you go through it, and you shouldn't be going through gates that are not on a public access trail either.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, it's, as you say, it's private property. All of the quantocks are owned by someone. It's not just kind of land that you can just use and abuse. As I say, most of it is grazed by sheep, cattle, horses, ponies. So yeah, do look after it and respect people's property.
Yeah, and do not block access to gateways or driveways when parking. I think sometimes people come along, and if they're not aware where there are parking areas, and of course on the quantocks you do have a number. Some are free and some are paid. I think Greatwood, you need to pay to go and park down in Greatwood.
Not anymore.
Not anymore. Oh, that's gone. That's a COVID reaction, is it?
No, I think it was a result of the parking machines being vandalised and yeah. So I think that's under review there. But obviously, Kilve now has a pay and display machine.
Yeah. But places like Dead Woman's Ditch, up at Staple Plain, and so on, that's still free parking up there.
Absolutely.
But there is limited parking, and if you find there aren't spaces, do be aware that parking in a gateway will often mean that you are blocking access for a farmer who may need to get a tractor in there, may need to get livestock transport there. If there was a veterinary emergency with livestock that was in there, if it's an arable field, he may need to get in there to do some ploughing or harrowing or whatever. And you being parked in his his or her gateway is not going to go down too well.
Absolutely, yeah, not very popular, that one. But it, leading on from that, it's worth saying that if the car park is full, don't just find somewhere else on the open common to park, because, as I said before, it erodes the grassland or the heathland, but also there is that exceptional risk that your hot exhaust could be touching the vegetation and again start a fire.
Sure.
It's something that it's a constant item for us to discuss with visitors to the area, and they sort of say, well, there is no sign saying to us don't do this, but we could literally have a sign for absolutely everything. And being a protected landscape, we don't want big lists of signs saying don't do this, don't do that, because it kind of spoils the enjoyment. But as you say, use the car parks. That's what they're there for. We appreciate some of them are a bit rustic, shall we say, but use the sort of stone hard surfaced car parks, but avoid parking anywhere else. We have noticed, speaking to other national parks, sort of Dartmoor and Exmoor, people are now parking in passing places on roads, which is free, but it means that emergency vehicles and general traffic can't get through. So please stick to the car parks.
Sure. And again, this is something to remember, is that certainly around our area here with Exmoor and the Quantocks, you've often got some large logging trucks and so on that are using narrow roads, and it is essential that those passing spaces are kept clear, because if you come across or a livestock transporter, for example, you're going to need to use that passing place so that larger local working vehicle can get past. I know I've been stuck behind a logging truck over towards North Malton, actually, where it was actually, I think, a visitor who just didn't want to reverse. And I think that's the other thing to bear in mind, that if you're on some of the narrow lanes here, there will come a time when you will need to reverse into a passing space. Be aware of that. And if you're not comfortable reversing, perhaps stick on the wider roads. So, yeah. Okay, moving on with the respect, everyone. Be nice, say hello, share the space. Yeah, obviously keeping space. We still need to be aware that we are still suffering from the pandemic. But yeah, we're all local, we're all friendly, and a nice hello, good morning always goes down well. And follow local signs and keep to marked paths. And we'll just touch on those in a little while. Protecting the environment. Take your litter home. Please leave no trace of your visit. This should be absolute common sense for everybody, that you come out to a natural environment. Plastic doesn't exist there, cans don't exist there. Any of those things can be dangerous to all the wildlife, and damaging also to the total ecosystem. So please take all your litter home. Yeah,
and I'd kind of supplement that by just saying, even kind of things that you would think would rot down, I take those as well. So apple cores, orange peel, it does take surprisingly long to rot, and as you say, we don't want items left out, particularly for the ponies. We've had a sort of recent campaign with the pony commoners to really stamp down on people feeding the ponies. They are there for grazing. Their bodies and their systems are designed to deal with kind of rough grazing. They're not there for carrots, apples, etc. You may think it's nice, but there's two issues there. Obviously, you're affecting its digestive system, but also then the ponies come into the car parks and can cause damage to cars. We had one car that had hoof prints all over it bonnet last year, and wanted to get quite upset about that. But if you're encouraging the ponies to come to these areas, then they're kind of big animals. They're not going to just give you a birth all the time.
Yeah, and the same goes with the Exmoor ponies that graze on Exmoor. They are absolutely totally adapted to conservation grazing, and they find plenty to browse on and do really well on the moorland, and they are in no way in need of any form of supplementary feeding.
Absolutely.
And as Andy has said, anything can upset the digestion system, but also encourage them to come to the car parks, cross the roads, all of which is dangerous for the ponies, and potentially for visitors as well. So enjoy seeing those ponies and taking your photographs of them, seeing them living in their natural state there on the moorland, but please don't feed them. Take care with barbecues and do not light fires. We've already talked about this. Now, so barbecues are allowed, are they, Andy?
Only in designated places, as we sort of touched on earlier. So right. Yes, Ramscombe, yes, in the designated places, and on picnic tables with the metal tops. But otherwise, no, we don't encourage it at all. I don't know quite what the situation on Exmoor is, but I would assume it's the same.
It is, I think, yes.
The other thing that we have noticed, that certainly over the Easter weekends, there were a lot of people having barbecues down on the foreshore at Kilve and East Quantock's Head, thinking that if they put them on the stones, that's fine. You would think so. Unfortunately, the makeup of the geology of those stones means that if they get really hot, they do explode. So
not what you want.
No, not very good for a kind of a family outing. And also, then once you've used this barbecue, it's quite often hot. What do you do with it? You don't want to carry it while it's still hot, so people leave it, which obviously gets into the marine conservation, the habitat there. But also, or people put water in it to kind of dilute it or cool it down, and it's not sensible. So, as I say, stick to the designated areas. Otherwise, just don't do it.
And dispose of your barbecue safely. Probably wait until it's completely cool and take it back again.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. We talked about keeping dogs under control and in sight. And as you say, at the moment, because it's protected landscape up on the Quantocks, that you need to keep them on lead because of the ground nesting birds, and also because it is lambing season. And however confident you are with your dog, there can always be the one-off incident where your dog does decide to chase, and if that happens and the dog's recall isn't excellent, and I know from my own dog, who is as good as gold, and generally is very good on recall, there are occasions when we get selective hearing with dogs. And so the safest thing is to keep your dog on a lead when you're in an environment where the wildlife is there and needs protection. So bear that in mind. And if your dog's recall is dodgy, definitely keep it on the lead.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's, as I said earlier, that lots of people have got new dogs, whether they're rehomed or whether they are brand new puppies to them, and it's different from being in your back garden where you can let it just run around and have 5 minutes of madness, just kind of herring around. Once it's in the wildlife, in the wild areas, as you said, they can just get a natural instinct and just disappear. So don't take the chance. Do put it on the lead. You can get slightly longer leads. So if you're going for a run or you're going for a longer walk, you can have them on a slightly longer lead, as long as they are staying with the confines of that path. Don't let them wander off into the undergrowth.
The undergrowth, sure, absolutely. Because once they do that, who knows?
Yeah, and it is easy, you know. Quite often you'll be talking to someone in a car park and they'll turn around and think, "Oh, where's my dog gone?" And you know, it only takes a split second and they're gone.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And I know, I mean, you do occasionally see the lost dog signs up on the hills, because it's happened, the dogs run off, and people haven't been able to find them. And that's the other thing, you know, to bear in mind. You know, if your dog wanders off in an open space like that, you may not be able to find it, and then you're going to be going home without your dog, and having to start up a whole search to find it and hope that it comes home safely. So get on the lead will mean that situation can't arise. So yeah,
Definitely. I mean, you know, you do hear stories of farmers going out and shooting dogs that are troubling their sheep, and ultimately they could do that if they chose to, but we hope it doesn't come to that. But it is surprising how many sheep they do lose, and particularly lambs they lose each year because dogs have either chased them or they've actually attacked them. So as you say, just be sensible with them.
Yeah, absolutely. Protecting the environment, again, on the countryside code here, we touched on dog poo, bag it and bin it, take it away, don't leave it on the hills. Now, I think forestry have a flick it system.
They used to have a stick it, flick it kind of rule, which I'm not sure that they still do, but it is something that can be used. Obviously, it prevents the plastic bags being everywhere.
Yeah.
However, having said that, obviously with the new volume of people and new volume of dogs, if there's just more and more dogs pooing everywhere, it's obviously going to change the nutrient levels in the peatland. So best thing to do is bag it and take it away.
And that's a very good point, and probably something people don't think about, that you know, is waste that's going back into the leaf litter and everything else that's fertilizing what's underneath, and it's going to alter the makeup of it. Yeah, absolutely.
And we're finding that some of the commoners have commented that some of their animals, they can't sell the meat on because they're picking up worms from dogs feces, and they can't then sell the meat on because the animals have now got the worms from the dogs. So it's not good.
I'm noticing more and more when I walk my dog in areas that are arable farming areas, that we're seeing signs up now alongside fields where they say, you know, this is, you know, a human consumption crop sort of thing. Please don't let your dog poo and leave the poo where it's going to be harvested. And if we think about it, that's a very logical thing. And you know, it really is a case of it is better to take it home, and also think that if you're a family with young children, the last thing you want to be doing is coming across dog poo on a path.
Definitely.
You know, I'm sure that there's quite a few parents out there who've had to deal with that horrible situation, and it isn't pleasant. So yeah, just think about that. Moving on to the third point here on the first page of the Countryside Code, then enjoy the outdoors. Check your route and local conditions. Now, I know both the Quantock Hills website and the Quantock Hills Facebook page have got lots of information on planning your visit. There is a planning your visit section on the Exmoor National Park website. I think we might have the link for that coming up as well sometimes. And that will allow you to know how long it's going to take you to walk a particular route, where you're going to start, where you're going to come back. Be aware that if you're going for a long walk and it's dry and hot, you will want to have water with you, have a mobile phone with you. Use an OS map if that's what you like, or a GPS system. There are a number of apps out there now. I just heard of another one today. what's it called? Trail View Ranger, is it? View Ranger, a lot of people are using now, which has biking and walking routes on it that you can download before you go. One of the things I will say, and I'm not so sure about over on the Quantocks anymore, Andy, but for people to be aware that there are certainly areas within the Exmoor National Park where mobile phone reception is still extremely limited. If you are down in some of the Coombs, down in some of the valleys, then you may well find you haven't got mobile phone reception. Obviously, emergency calls will work, but if you're trying to access a map app or something similar, you're going to find you're going to have to get to a higher point probably before you can get reception. How is it on the Quantocks with that, Andy?
It's a bit mixed, as you said, with Exmoor. So in the Coombs around Holford, excuse me, even between the different networks that operate, people have different levels of reception. So it is a bit hit and miss in some places. As you said, the 999 calls will work. We're finding that they respond very well to, and it works throughout the Quantocks, is the What 3 Words app on your phone or device. So if you are in difficulty and you haven't got an OS map, the What 3 Words system does work extremely well. But as you said, it's worth planning your route before you go out. We've got suggested waymark trails around the Quantocks. If you're less confident about kind of just planning a route from scratch, and it's worth kind of thinking about the terrain, the conditions, whether it's hot, cold, wet, whatever, whether you need a drink, whether you need some lunch. Obviously, with village and other facilities now opening, obviously you can stop at cafes and pubs from now on, but if you're out all day, take a snack as well, because it's can be hard work if you're out for the long haul.
Yeah, and be aware as well of the weather conditions. Weather can change fairly quickly on the hills. If there is a risk of rain, do make sure that you've got a raincoat or some such to keep you dry, and be aware of your footwear as well. Although a lot of the paths are very, very good, depending again on where you're walking, sometimes you're going to be dealing with areas that are muddy, areas that might be a bit rocky. Certainly there might be uneven ground, so you need a good sturdy shoe for walking with. It amazes me how many people I see who go off in day shoes or fairly light, not even trainers, but more like plimsolls. And you sort of think, I hope it's not going to be muddy where you're going.
Yeah, and I've seen people up Snowdon in flip-flops, and you think, oh, what are you doing? But yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it is usually it's those simple kind of things that usually incur the wrath of the emergency services, whether it's the Exmoor and Quantock rescue service, dealing with people with twisted ankles just because they haven't taken the right footwear or taken the right precautions in advance.
Yeah. So, and say advice on planning your outing, either to Quantock Hills or Exmoor, available on their websites, definitely think ahead. Think about how long you're going to be out, and your route, how much of it is hilly, and bear in mind that really pretty much most of the walks you do, and not all, there are some flat walks, there are even some accessible walks, aren't there, Andy?
Yep.
Up at Webber's Post, there's an accessible walk up on Exmoor, and I think, is it Great Wood's got an accessible walk?
It has, yeah. It's called the Red Route, which is kind of reasonably flat, but it's all a hard forest track, so it's reasonably good. There's obviously Fine Court has got a less abled route. There's a sort of short one with a picnic table out at Staple Plain car park as well. So, and there is a route from the car park at Kilve out to again a picnic bench out above the beach that is wheelchair friendly. So yeah, there are, and Cothleston Hill, a certain part of that track is wheelchair friendly. So there are routes, but it's worth researching before you turn up.
Before you go, yeah, absolutely.
It's worth raising the issue. Obviously, we've talked about increase in dogs, but we've also seen a massive increase in the amount of cyclists, both road and particularly mountain bikers on the Quantocks since the first lockdown. I think most bike shops nationally have sold out, and they're only now restocking or being able to restock. So again, the terrain is quite rocky on the Quantocks, apart from in the forest tracks. So make sure your bike is up to the job, let alone yourself and your footwear. If you're just kind of buying a cheap end bike, it might not cope with a rocky descent for half a mile or whatever. And again, plan your route, because you might get to the far end of the hills and think, I've no idea where I'm going.
Yeah, very good advice, definitely. And in fact, that sort of leads quite nicely on to just looking at the next part of the Countryside Code there, follow advice and local signs. And you'll see the first 4 items there are coloured arrows, and they do indicate what is allowed on each of the routes. And these are very clearly, I think, identified in most cases, aren't they, Andy?
Yeah, from every road access to a footpath, a bridleway or whatever, there is a description of what it is, or whether it's a footpath or bridleway, and they will usually have those colour-coded arrows on them as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And so as we can just see quickly there, those that are designated as footpaths are not for horses or for cyclists, carriage driving, motorcyclists or cars, fairly obviously. But it might be just worth pointing out that they're not for horses or cyclists either. Bridle ways cover all of those categories. Restricted byways, interestingly, you are allowed to carriage drive on.
If you want to, you can, yeah.
Don't see a lot of that though, do you?
Not much, no.
And as its description sounds, a byway open to all traffic, and there aren't a great deal of them, but there are 1 or 2 is open to all traffic. So, but worth looking at these last 3 icons there on the Countryside Code. Permissive paths. Tell us a little bit about permissive paths, Andy.
So these are set up with the landowner's permission, but they are permissive, as it says. So the landowner is giving you permission to perhaps ride a horse or a bike on a route that is legally defined as a footpath, but the landowner has said, actually, I don't mind if you use these other forms of transport because it links up other routes, or it's a route that might have been used in the past. So you have to follow, again, the guidance on that sign that tells you what it is permissive to do on that path. So, as I say, parts of the Quantock Greenway, which is a figure of 8 path all the way around the Quantocks, parts of that are footpaths, but the landowner has allowed horse riders to use that section as well. So check locally, what the signs say.
Yeah. And I think the same goes on, moving on to sort of national trails. I know the Coleridge Way, of course, starts on the Quantocks.
It does, yeah.
Goes now right the way across to Exmoor. But part of that is a bridle way as well, isn't it?
Yeah, and certain parts of it do split. So there's an official walking route and an official riding route. Some of it overlaps, but in certain places the route splits and horse riders and cyclists have to go one way and walkers go the other way. So yeah, again, it's clearly signed at each junction where you can and can't go.
Yeah, and the Southwest Coast Path, or is it the Southwest Coast Path now? There's still some closures on that along the coast, aren't there?
I think there are some where there's been some cliff slippages, but again, there will be signs locally telling you, where the diversion is.
Where the diversions are. Yeah,
Yeah,
I know that there's one at the bottom of my lanes. I know that is the case.
Yeah, the England Coast Path now runs. Sort of the Somerset section is pretty much is all done, apart from the bit going from Breen down up to the Severn crossing. But from Breen down all the way across to the Devon border is all walkable, and it is usable with links back inland to local villages and shops and so on.
Yeah, so for a longer walking holiday or whatever, definitely a thought to look at that coastal path, which is fascinating. Our final icon there, Andy, is open access. Now, I know there are some areas on the Quantocks that are open access. Do you want to give us a little bit of info on that?
Yeah, so that's land that's essentially on the Quantocks. It's land that's owned by National Trust, Forestry England, or is land that is common land. So the Asholt Common, sort of from Lydiard Hill over towards Twiscombe Stone, most of the sort of heathland from Crocombe Park Gate over to Netherstowe and up to Staple Plain. It's all the kind of open tops of the Quantocks essentially, is open access, which means you can walk pretty much anywhere, apart from obviously fenced off areas if there's a quarry or a bit of private property, but you can walk anywhere. It doesn't apply to horse riders or cyclists. It's only for walkers. But as I said before, dogs must be kept on leads between the 1st of March and the 31st of July in all those areas. But it's great. It means that you can, deviate a little bit from the path, and have a picnic a bit away from where you would normally go. But again, it's back to respecting the countryside.
Absolutely, and really, if the paths are there, rather than tramping across, an ecosystem that you don't know perhaps how fragile that might be, better to stay on the path, if you possibly can. Yeah,
absolutely. I mean, it's obviously affecting the wildlife that you might be tramping through, and we've got things that are emerging at the moment. We've got ground nesting birds, we've got the reptiles are coming out, so the adders are coming out of hibernation. I'm seeing quite a few already this year, but in response, the wildlife might get you back. So the ticks are out in quite big numbers at the moment. So if you are walking through the bracken and the gorse and the bramble, you can expect to find ticks on yourself, particularly if you're wearing shorts or short sleeve shirts. So do check yourself when you get home.
Yeah, absolutely, and that is something to be aware of. That both Exmoor National Park and the Quantocks are home to deer, they're home to sheep, and there are tick risks on both. And yes, definitely, if you are walking through undergrowth and with your dog as well, check yourself and your dog for ticks when you get back. In fact, I took a tick from my dog just yesterday, and all we'd done was walk a local path round farmland. So they are definitely there already.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. And you could just sit down on a flat bit of open grassland and they're there as well. So it is worth taking account of. Just going back to one of the other things that we're talking about, the different signs and usages of the paths. We are finding more and more apps that have been created for cycling use and for walking use. They're quite often sort of laid down or set by someone who's just made up a route, and they haven't necessarily followed the correct paths that they should have been using. But once it's kind of laid down on this app, is there for other people to follow, particularly for mountain bikers. We're finding them saying, well, you know, I can go along here because it says on my app I can go this way. And we said, well, actually, you're walking down someone's private drive, cycling down someone's drive, or you're going down a footpath. You shouldn't be here. And they say, oh, it says here I can. Well, no, you need to check these routes properly. So please do that, particularly people who are doing longer distance routes by mountain bikes and then camping as they're going. You know, they think once they've got the route, it's all, you know, good to go, but check before you do set out.
Yeah, absolutely. But I think, you know, above all, what we want you to do is to come and enjoy these open spaces. They are so good for your well-being. Getting your vitamin D, being out there in the morning light, is good for us. We all know that. And the feeling of just well-being and contentment that you can get from enjoying our wonderful wild open spaces is certainly a distinct benefit, and we are very fortunate here to have these spaces, and let's try and keep them as lovely as they are. And many thanks to Andy and all the rangers at both the Quantocks and Exmoor National Park, all the teams that work to keep those environments as lovely as they are, for all that you do. And thank you, Andy, for joining us today. That's been okay.
Nice to talk to you.
Everybody. Hope that's been useful to you. Any questions? I can't see any questions that have come up in the comments, but if there are any questions based on this after we've come off live, please just either post them in the comments or message our Facebook live page. We'll be happy to get those answered for you. So thanks everybody, and goodbye for today. Bye.